Let's take our query 3 working file. Again, it's simply a blank Excel file. We're going to use it to get and transform some data. So from the data ribbon, we could go with new query, but for this step, because we've been connecting to existing data sources, if we go to recent sources, it shows me the recent databases that I've been connecting to. And there's my employees database right at the top. I'm taken straight into the navigator window, from which I can choose the employees table. Now, if your preview is taking a while to load, you can just go straight into edit if you know that's the data that you want. 99 rows are now loading in, and then they'll be starting to be previewed down the central of my query editor. Now, what I wanted to show this time with the query editor is the ability to add a new column, so a calculated column of your own. It may be that I'd like to create a column that takes the title and the surname as a single new column. Not a problem. We go to add column. I'd like to add a custom column, please, and I'd like it to go here. So let's click into title, add custom column. What's my column's new name? I'm going to call it salutation. And then in the lower section, I create the formula that will effectively will calculate my new column. Well, that's going to take title, insert, ampersand, speech marks, space, ampersand, hang on, let's close the speech marks, and then ampersand, surname, insert. So the formula in here effectively is any formulas that you can use in Excel, whether that's text manipulation or numerical manipulation. I'm taking the title, concatenating a space, and then concatenating the surname. This will create a new column called salutation. When I say OK, my new column is calculated and inserted at the end here. So you can see I've got Mrs. Parker, Mr. D. Silver, Sir Great, Lord Fauntleroy, all the way down to the last one. I've been able to add a new column. That new column will now form part of the basis for this query editor. So you can see here the applied step of added column. If I were to then remove some of the columns I don't want, as we've done previously, choose columns, I'll have the ID, first name, the salutation, that's my calculated field, and salary, the town. So I have less columns, but one of the columns I do have is mine, the one I've created, the calculated one. And that calculated column could be a numeric column. It doesn't have to be a text column as we've done here. So I could add a new column, a new custom column. I'm going to call it bonus. Notice that we can only choose from columns that we haven't hidden. So you have to create your custom column before you hide any of the columns you might want to use. In this case, luckily I want to use the salary column, and it's going to be the salary multiplied by 0.2. 20% is going to be the bonus. A new column gets created and added to the end here. If I'm now happy with my two new calculated columns, I can see that they've been added in the applied step. I now simply close and load, and the result of my query work is then loaded into Excel. If I then wanted to create another query based on the same data, I can go to Data, Recent Sources, Employees Data. That takes me straight to the navigator, so I'm not having to go look for the Access database, the employees, and then edit. But this time in the query editor, this is a different query to the last one. The last one has my two calculated columns in and some of the other columns hidden. This time, I'm going to look at doing a grouping. So I can choose Group By, which is on the Home ribbon, or the Transform ribbon. No matter which one you choose it from, you'll be taken to the same dialog box. What would I like to group by? Well, I'd like to group by the town city. New column name, well, I'd actually like it to sum the salary. We'll call it salary total. Here I'm adding a grouping to my data based on the town, and I'm summing the salary by each of the unique towns. Okay, a little bit of work takes place, and there's my result. Total for each of the towns that exist in my data. I can then go to close and load, and that will load into a new sheet. You can see here it's a separate query, and in the workbook queries, it's a separate query. I have one query that is using the employees table and loads in 99 rows, and then another using the same TBL employees, but only loads in 9 rows because it's added a grouping to it. So two data sources are being fed into my workbook from a single data source, if that makes sense. We can carry out different queries, different groupings, different calculations on the same data, wherever that might be. In this case, it's in an Access database. And that information is then loaded into Excel as different sheets, each of the sets of data being placed inside a table. And we know all about table tools, so we can change the design. We can have a totals row at the bottom. All those kind of things still work with your table. It's just where the data comes from. And the data comes from this external database using the get and transform tool. So we get the data, we transform the data, and we display that data in Excel in a table. Here is my grouped query based on the employees table. Once it's in Excel, we can then do as we see fit. For example, I could create a quick chart on my summary just by doing the F11, which we learned a lot earlier. And then I have column charts. So this data is coming from this table. This table is coming through the query editor where the grouping is taking place. The data is then coming from an Access database. Hopefully, you're starting to see some real power here in the Get and Transform tools that are built directly into Microsoft Excel from 2016. No additional software required, no additional downloads, no additional add-ins to install and to crash. It's already there, ready to use.